Hey, this is Mike Shank, and this is the At Speed podcast presented by Rocky Fork Company.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with yet another edition of At Speed with Mike Shank and yours truly, Tim May. And Mike, before we get into the brass tacks of what you guys learned and didn't learn in your first major test of the season with your IndyCar program and driver Jack Harvey at the Circuit of the Americas right outside Austin this past week, I think we've primed people enough to know that you owners were going to have your first major meeting with the new captain of IndyCar racing, Roger Penske, and I'm just wondering what could people be expecting that's going to be new this year, or what did he tell you that you can tell folks out there about what to expect? It could be a little bit different.
Well, first of all, I'm glad we're back talking here again today, Tim. We did just come back from Austin. It was a really good week for us down there, minus the weather. And we did have this meeting you're talking about with Roger, and that was great. And it was Roger and about 12 of us, right?
Yeah.
So the people that are really invested in the series, committed to running in it full season, and it was a great opportunity for him to talk to us directly without anyone in between us.
Yeah.
And there's several things, and I got to tell you, my partner Jim Meyer and I met with him a little bit at the Rolex 24, and I could tell then, his words to me were, he repeated them, I'm going on this. Like, this is the best project I've ever been a part of, he said to me.
Wow.
Now, you think about what that means when Roger Penske says that, right?
Oh, yeah. I've been around him a lot. And you're right. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can tell you probably four major hitters here, and the detail are going to come out in a little bit shortly here about what he's going to do for this year right away. We're talking about the purse being higher than it's ever been. We're talking about making qualifying a little more exciting, especially for the last chance, the last row guys.
Wow.
We're talking about more horsepower for qualifying. So I think you're going to see the speeds go over the record number this year, potentially.
Wow.
He's got 4 or 5 new sponsors that are coming to the track that we haven't seen before. And he's working on a bunch of multi-million-dollar, kind of infrastructure and fan experience investments, right?
Yeah.
A lot,
Yes, just like you expected.
Well, yeah, I think one thing we can all expect is really, really good bathrooms, right? So
exactly.
Those are just some of the big hitters you're going to read about here shortly or have already.
Yeah.
And but for the long term, for us as people that are multi-million dollars invested into this vision,
there you go.
I feel like, again, I said this to you before, Tim. I think Jim and I hit the timing pretty right on this, and I think there's some really cool things for the team owners coming in a year or two. I can't talk about now, but I'm excited about it. And I tell you, our product, there's 27 drivers down there at this test, okay? And you think about that. That's a lot, right?
Yes.
And they're all within 0.8 of each other around a 3.5 mile course, right?
Yes.
0.8. That doesn't matter if you're in whose car you're in. I mean, the cars are so equal now. It really is coming back to a driver's series. And it's just really, really difficult. I mean, we are working on the minutia to try to eke an advantage out somehow.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this real quick before we move on, because I want to ask you about that, because I watched it intently, especially the second day when y'all actually got to run when it finally cleared up a little bit late in the afternoon, but and got to go fast, as the old saying goes. But just from a speed standpoint, in other words, people should expect a possible – what Ari Leindak's record, I forget the record there. I think it's 236 point something. Do you think it could be higher than that? Is that
I think it's going to be close. With the by the way, this is the first time in the history that we all were out on the track with the new screen, the new windscreen, right?
Right.
And it went well in that regard. I'm telling you, it's not a bad thing. It's definitely an adjustment for all of us, but it went well. That screen adds a little bit of drag. So I don't know ultimately where we're going. I don't know where the simulations say we're going to end up with this extra power, but it's going to be close. I would think it's 233 or 34 or 35. I would think.
I know you can't give me details right now, but I mean the back row situation. You're talking about a shootout for the back row or more of a shootout for the last spot? What just give people a hint of what you think is
Yeah,
coming.
I think again we'll let the press releases state it at the end, but I think what it'll be is a more opportunity to do multiple runs. So last year
Gotcha.
they did a shootout for the last three, but you only got one run.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like last, if this year, if it happened like last year, Alonso could have gone again to try to bump it again back in. Right.
Right.
Potentially. So it just that last row thing, and I wandered out there on the pit lane. I'm telling you, it was electric out there.
Yes,
it was really exciting, and I think they're going to expand on that and give the people what they want.
Yeah, and I know you've noticed this. I mean, that in my opinion, that's more exciting than the run for the pole, because the run for the pole, all 9 are in no matter what. I call it that downhill skiing approach to IndyCar qualifying. You get one shot to go down the hill, on the final day. But the run for the last spot in the field is so much more dramatic, because people's race teams' futures, etc., drivers' futures, reputations rest on it, right?
Yeah. And just all kinds of things rest on it.
Yeah.
The future of lots of things, and anyways, I think it's pretty special, and and I'm glad they're building on that. But I just think it's going to 5 years from now. That's we have this conversation again, Tim. What did Roger bring to the speedway and to the series? I think it's going to be substantial.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in other words, that's what you left that meeting feeling more than anything else is what's to come. Well,
that's right.
Yeah, let's get back. Hey, you've already touched on. I wanted to ask you about the Aero screens. I was going to get into it later, but obviously these things add some weight to the front of the car. In my opinion, watching them come down the straightaways, it looks like they're wider looking than I thought they were going to be. If you understand what I'm saying, you kind of touched. You kind of touched on that a little bit. I don't know there won't be a difference, right, in speedway configuration, at least for the Aero screen. Headed toward Indy, right? I mean, they're going to look like they look now, right? Is that correct?
Well, for one thing, the front view of the screen makes it look wide at the top. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Other views of it, you don't see that as much.
Exactly.
And I get that. And, you got to remember also, Tim, this tub was not designed for this thing, right?
Correct.
So they're trying to hit some parameters that don't really, if they got to redesign the car again, it might not look that awkward, even with that same halo on it,
Yes.
But from a safety standpoint, I mean, it's just a necessary thing, I think, and I'm for it. We're playing around with the way we put banners around the top of it, because that changes the look of it. But that front view can be a little wicked sometimes.
Yeah. But I wanted to ask you this though: what did Jack think? And your engineers. How much? Because there was a lot of talk there. I watched the 2 days of the spring training, even though it's the middle of the winter training down there at COTA. And what did they think about? There are a lot of people. I don't know if complaining wasn't the right word, but there was concern initially about how much weight it added to the front. You put an IndyCar on your finger. You want it to balance. Almost right in the middle, I would think. And there was some talk that that the windscreen added some weight to the front of the car, the front half of the car. What was your take on that, Mike, from what you heard from your engineers and what you observed?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely shifts what we call the balance, right? But it wasn't anything that really made anyone upset.
Okay.
Right? Like there was much more difference for Jack specifically in the setups between Andretti's that we use from the Andretti's and the Schmitz that we used the last 2 years.
Huh.
There was a bigger delta, bigger change in that than the windscreen, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
One interesting thing, we got to, even we had such terrible weather on the first day, but we did get to run the car some in the wet,
Yes.
and the vision can get a little weird with water also.
Yes.
We have their heated windscreens to try to help them not fog or anything like that. And you also get weird water trails coming into the car that they're not used to, right?
Yes.
So there's definitely some weirdness. Also, we have tear-offs on the windscreen now, and we have to address that in pit stop. So we got to have IndyCar has decided that we can have one person dedicated solely to the tear-offs
Yeah.
In the pit stop.
Yeah.
And you remember, these pit stops are 6.8 seconds total. That's
Yes.
all you're sitting there for. So you can't have that mess the whole thing up.
So are you going to be the windscreen ripper-offer? I mean,
No.
the tear-off ripper-offer?
No.
You're going to let Brian do that? I mean, who have you got designated?
Someone more brave than that. Someone more braver than he and I'll tell you.
Yeah, I was going to say, man. I mean, because he's going to go right out there with the refueler, right next door to the. Between him and the front left tire changer. That'll be interesting to watch. Hey,
that's right.
Well, let's get right down to it. You wanted to make a showing. We talked about that. I'm going to hold you at your words. I remember what you said from one podcast to the next. You guys, I think, ended up 13th on the final day in the final analysis. But there was a time there when a lot of guys were running really stout, and you guys were as high as third on the totem pole. What do you take from that test, Mike? The first test. What you as a car owner, what did you glean from it?
Yeah, there's a lot of positive stuff. A lot of that, IndyCar testing is interesting because everybody wants to be the fastest at the end of the day. So that means you got a time when you put your new tires on. COTA is a high degradation, meaning the tires go away quick, right? Yeah, so you only get 2 laps maybe and they're done. So we tried to time it. We didn't get to run our last new tire run. So we don't truly know where we are. I would say we probably would have ended up 6th, 7th, or 8th, something like that. But beyond that, took a lot of positive stuff away. The way the car felt for Jack most of the time, the engineering staff that a lot of them are new, the crew that I have working on the car now. We had some incredible pit stop practice with faster than we've ever been over the wall, which was really encouraging to me. It was all the car ran perfectly the whole time with no issues, which is also very good. We rolled out there at noon and we didn't roll back until 6 o'clock. So we did six solid hours of running.
Yeah.
And the engineer punched through his list. And we were pretty happy. I mean, I just see a lot of potential here if we can keep kind of just, nose down, keep working on the car for Jack. Jack, Jack's comment was this car drives totally different than the Schmidt-Peterson car that we had, their engineering. So it took a little bit of time for him to kind of figure out how this car likes to be driven.
Yeah, give people a little bit of a hint. Like, what does that mean? I mean, in other words, when the back end. I mean, explain to people what that difference might be a little bit, just from a feel standpoint.
So when you look at the cars from the outside, they all look exactly the same. So that means all the coach work and the wheels and the wings they're all the same. So you think, okay, he's just driving another car. But the truth is, underneath the skin, there's a lot of things you can do to make it your own and make it better.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the trick. That's the secret sauce, right? Like how do you do that? And it's everything from the braking systems, master cylinders, brake lines, to springs, to shock absorbers, to we have all these ride height machines that we can keep them off the ground in a straight line, and all kinds of stuff. So there's many differences between one team to another, and to find that out, it takes some time to work on that, understand how to drive it, understand what it wants when it needs a change. But that's the great thing. Andretti's a strong engineering group, but I got to tell you, when you're up on that pit stand and you have the data from the other cars, right, the other team cars, it's just invaluable to understand where you sit, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
You just know. As an example, we were third out of the 6 Andretti cars. We were third in the end of the day.
Correct.
But beyond that, we have the data ahead of us and we have the data behind us and ours, right?
Yeah.
So we know where Veach did something really well, or Colton did something well or not, or us did well or not. We get to see that, and it's pretty cool. I think the potential of it is tremendous.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the fact y'all were the third fastest of the 6, in that group, and but when you talk about you're looking at data there in front of you are you looking at just times through corners? What are you looking? What are the tip offs there that you're looking at from the data?
Well, we're looking at all kinds of things. You can see downforce loads. You can see braking loads from corner to corner. Yeah. We can get in the minutia of it and compare it to the other drivers doing stylistically different things on the track, and did it benefit them or not?
Yeah.
This is not a secret. This is stuff that everybody does. They have a time loss line on the data so you can see where you're losing 0.3 here and 1/10 there, half a tenth there, or better, whichever the case. But when you have a foundation like we have with the Andretti technical partnership, it's really deep. I mean, it's there's just a well of information, and we all we understand what they have, they know what we have, and we can try to make it better.
Did you it was just I like delving into this stuff because that's where you find speed. It's in 1/100ths of a second now, a little bit here, a little bit there, right? And But for Jack, did you actually, as y'all spoke, over the two, obviously you got very little out of it except wet weather running from the first day, but as y'all spoke, through the sessions, the different times you were out there, did you see him actually change the way he was driving the car based on the new setup, so to speak, or the new baseline you guys are dealing with? Did you actually witness that? If you follow my drift?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We definitely did. And we talked about it with him, the things that he stylistically had to change between the two setups of the cars. We go, each person starts with a base setup, and then you kind of go off on your own. But even the base setup is quite a bit different than what he's used to. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong or different at this point. I'm just saying it's different, and we have to adapt to it and understand what it likes and what it doesn't like. So there's a little bit of a training period there.
Yeah, give people just a little bit of a slice. What did you see him change a little bit? That it's not giving away secrets, but I mean that you can see. Because I think that's the greatness of any athlete, that they adapt to what they've got, and then you don't have to tell them once or twice, and then boom, they've got it. What did you see him do just in that little short time of practice? I don't want to go too deep into it really, because there's things, but just how and when he breaks, is different, and it's not better or worse potentially. It's just different. So you just got to figure these things out, right? Yeah. As you looked up and down pit lane, you leave there, number one, knowing kind of where you are, whether there's a comfortability with the car yet or not, but you also are perusing the competition, for one of another term. What'd you leave there thinking, Mike? In terms?
I left there thinking there's 15 people who could win this race. Literally. I mean, like, there are no, but Tim, you followed this longer than I have practically. You can always count on some people that are just never going to be competitive.
Right.
And it's just not the case anymore. Everybody is competitive and deserves to be there and has a fight, kind of a, you look at like Felipe Nasser was there. This is an XF1 guy from Sauber a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He this is a guy, he drove for me in 2012 at Daytona, by the way. But I'm just saying that, that guy shows up and immediately he's nearer on pace. Right.
Yes.
And like these folks, I mean, this is a real deal. I mean, this is as hard as it gets. These cars are hard to drive. They move around a lot. They dance around a lot. They're heavy compared to, say, a Formula One car,
Yes.
But everybody's got near similar cars. So it really just comes down to the driver getting the car at least close enough that they can kind of do what they need to do.
Who is a driver? I've never asked you this. Who is a driver out there that you sort of like think sets the bar, though, when it comes to, forget about the race, the actual go fast aspect of things? I've always, in my opinion, if the driver's there, I would grab willpower to drive the car one time and drive the hell out of it, if you follow my drift. I'm not knocking Jack or anybody else, but I'm just going on, recent, last 10 years results. Who is a driver that catches your eye that you kind of go, okay, this guy is setting the bar. Let's see what we can take off of that. You're when you start scouting the opposition.
Well, I mean, honestly, and I don't think anyone would argue with this. Dixon is the guy that everybody aspires to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got you.
Now, I mean, that's the bottom line. From qualifying to the race, he is just so incredibly smart in the car, and everybody knows it. Everybody agrees. I don't think you'll find anyone really. I would say he is the bar, right? Yeah. Now, and I haven't seen him slow down, really, to be honest with you. Not yet, anyways. Now, eventually that day will come, but. There's plenty of people behind him, and that have potential to be that great. But he's got that rare ability to be thinking the whole entire time. He's got so much brain capacity. He can think about strategy while trying to go 10/10 in the car, which is tricky because your brain is really hard to multitask at that level, right?
Yes.
And he has that ability to do that, and that's really served him. On top of having a good team, getting stuff underneath him that works. But he can always get himself out of a pickle, and that's a rare thing.
Yeah, I tell you what, I brought up Will Power only because I've always been impressed by him being able to, in that last, make or break, like qualifying run on a road course, just finding something extra. You know what I mean? I've been impressed by that his whole career, especially the last 10 years. A guy that always catches my eye now for the last year and a half is Colton Herta. Seems to have something going for him in that regard. And I'm not just saying this because you're listening. I think Jack Harvey is talented. I watched, quite a few times when they isolated on y'all's car, him running around just this past week at COTA, and I'm just impressed by how pretty consistent he is on his line, but he appears to have the ability, like you said, to kind of figure out, where can it be a little bit quicker, et cetera. Is that what jumps out to you about him also?
No question about it. Jack is a thinking man's driver, and takes things at his own pace, but we want to surround him with the best support we can, which I think we've done this time, and give him a complete opportunity to show what he's capable of. I think we've talked about expectations a little bit. I expect us to finish in the top 5 a handful of times this year and pop up on the podium 3 or 4 times also.
Yeah.
Maybe squeak a win in. I'm always realistic. We're still relatively new to this and haven't done every single track yet. But again, Jack's one of those guys that absolutely deserve to be here, and he's putting the work in. I can promise you that he's putting the work in to make sure he capitalizes on. Both he and I don't take this for granted. Meaning, we have a multi-year deal, but after that, what happens, right? So we got to get while we can, get it while we can. So.
Yeah, and plus you're going to have a lot more shots at the target this year.
We are, yeah. So we're going to hit it hard back to back. You have a bad weekend, we can come back. We want our bad weekends to be like P10 or 11 or 12, right? Yeah. That's a bad weekend, right? And everything else is be up above that.
Well, what impresses me about him, he takes care of his equipment too, Mike. Maybe I think that sets a lot of drivers apart. They can find the edge, search for the edge without going over it, so to speak, a lot. And that's what has impressed me about Jack. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're dead. You're completely 100% right. He really does.
Yeah. When you're rebuilding a car every other race, that's no fun.
It's no fun at all.
Real quickly, y'all's next foray in an IndyCar is when and where?
Next time we go out, it's the beginning of March. We're going to Sebring for a test, and then we have a weekend off, and then we go to St. Pete. So we have one more test day, and then we're off to the St. Petersburg Grand Prix. Off next week. I'm heading to Sebring next week with the IMSA program to do some testing. That program doesn't get back on the track until the week of March 21, 22 at Sebring 12 hour.
Yeah. Real quickly, and when it comes to Sebring in a test, and then moving on to help people understand the logistics of running an IndyCar team, and you're based in Pataskala, Ohio. Do you go down to Sebring, come back, and then go back to St. Pete, or does your team stay down there?
That's a good question. In this case, we're going to go down, and we have 2 truck drivers that drive our hauler, and they'll get down there quickly, run the test day, and they'll come right back. So we'll have about 5 days in the shop before we have to go back down to St. Pete.
Yeah, and your hauler, your IndyCar program has one hauler, right? You don't take.
We have two pieces of equipment, 2 haulers basically.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep.
And you take them both to Sebring.
We'll take them both starting at St. Pete. We'll only take one to Sebring.
Okay. So the second one is to take all of your hospitality gear, right?
Support equipment. That's right.
Support equipment. Excuse me. Hey, real quick before we go, man. The kickoff for NASCAR is this weekend, Daytona 500.
Yeah.
As the old saying goes, who do you like, Mike, and why?
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this, and I'm sure most people saw the Busch Clash and how much of a disaster that was.
Yes.
There's not a lot to be added to that, except it's not great for anybody. I don't think you'll find one Cup driver that really likes to do that race. Truly, I think there's some that are very good at it, right? That know how to draft. What I like to talk more about, Tim, is the dark horses. And one of them is a guy named Michael McDowell.
There you go.
And Okay, for me now, we know some of the premier guys that there's the one JTDG car that's on pole, which is cool. Know those guys well.
Yeah.
Glad they got that pole. That'll be a fast car. But you go back in there, and these guys like Kyle and Harvick and stuff, these guys really, really know what they're doing, right?
Yes.
And anything can happen there, and that's the beauty. That's the only thing I love about Daytona. You could have Michael McDowell win the race, and now Michael's pretty damn good on super speedways. So he understands side drafting and all that. So I have a feeling of an upset, but let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's see. I like an upset, and trust me, I'll be watching. I'll be watching on Sunday.
Well, I tell you what, I think the Hendrick cars are going to be stout in the if they're in the lead, so to speak, is what I've gotten out of it. Bowman especially has caught my eye.
Sure.
And then of course the William Byron. I mean, a lot of people ripped on him last year, taking over that 24 car, but him getting that first sort of win at Daytona in the qualifying races, I thought was pretty big, and he's got Chad Knaus on the box with him, so that's interesting. But a guy I've got my eye on just because, number one, I like his team, and number two, he's kind of shown a little bit in the past is Di Benedetto, with the Wood brothers. I mean, I think that car's going to be pretty stout, and then of course, whether you like this team or not, I think the Penskes are going to be pretty good. I mean, especially Logano, man. I think he scares enough people that they get out of his way, so to speak.
Yeah, he'll take you right out.
Yeah, but hey, real quick though, before you go, do you watch the 500? Do you like watching the 500? What's your as a fan's take on it?
I like watching the last 20 laps.
There you go. Yeah.
I like and then when it gets excited, I'm telling you, it's awesome to watch, and that part I can really appreciate. I can tell you, being down there at Daytona, it's a great event to be at, right? It's just a great atmosphere. And I'll tell you, if people haven't gone to the new across the street, the new Daytona area, the new shopping center and hotels and stuff right across the street now, it's just beautiful.
Yeah. And
it's really become a destination. Yeah, you got the beach and you can go do that, but then you have all this stuff related to racing across the street now. That's really, really a cool deal.
Mike, one last thing I wanted to touch with you before we go. You're a team owner, right?
Yeah.
You've invested a lot of time, effort, and money into your profession, right?
Yep.
Do you think it would help? Do you think it would curb some of these, the big ones and things like this in auto racing? Not that you could necessarily do it like an insurance company, but if you cause a big one and it's obvious you caused a big one, that you have to help pay the price, the cost of fixing all these other guys' cars. I mean, how has that never become a thing, I guess, in auto racing? I don't quite understand it.
There would be no possible way that could happen, Tim. No possible way. And the reason is because you could litigate this thing into the ground with what really happened. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I veered up, but my right front tie rod broke. Yeah. Okay, then we got to go do extensive tearing it apart to see what really happened. You know,
I'm with you.
I mean, it's just way too much. We all get in these things. We all understand it's racing, and it literally we sign something that says it's racing. Anything can happen.
Right.
We're not liable. You're not liable. Just go do your thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Even a media guy has to sign the same thing. But like last night though, it was a near big one. I'm talking as we record this in that one of those the last qualifying race. Coming down the stretch, William Byron's in the lead, but Kurt Busch made a move from like third place and was gonna make a move into the sucker hole. You know what I mean, to try to get by.
Yeah.
And at first it looked like Kurt Busch caused this problem. This is what I was getting to. But really, when you look at it, Jimmy Johnson, who was right in front of him, made a slight move to kind of block him, which made Kurt go a little bit farther and actually hit a guy, And so you're right. Once you start litigating it, where does it stop and where does it end? You're right. But I just remember last year's 500, and I can't remember the driver's name, but he caused about 3 major problems in that race. And it wasn't because of breakage. It was just boneheaded moves. And
I think that was your poll. That's your pole sitter this year.
Yeah,
to be honest with
you. Exactly. So I'm not going to name any names, but you know where I'm going with that. Well, hey, we'll be back.
All right, man.
Hey, next time out, man, we'll be back to talk about that and a lot more. And ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you watching and listening to At Speed with Mike Shank and yours truly, Tim May. And when we have something else to talk about in a couple of weeks, we'll be back to let you all know about it. Until then, this is Tim May speaking for Mike Shank. See you later.